So, where to begin? Mother 3, you know it, you love it, you probably want it localized, and no, I am not talking about the fan translation, I'm talking official, licensed, Nintendo seal of quality stuff. But if you're watching this video, I do hope you've played the fan translation, because I will be spoiling major parts of Mother 3's plot. The fan translation is pretty phenomenal, and I really don't want to ruin the experience for anybody interested in playing it. And while we do have the fan translation, there's been plenty of theorizing about why Mother 3 has not been officially localized. Many have speculated that Mother 3 won't be releasing in the West due to some questionable content within the game. Now, this has been theorized for quite a while, but according to a recent report by Game Informer's senior editor Imran, he seemingly confirms these suspicions. Nintendo tried localizing the game at one point, but held back specifically due to difficulties localizing its content. So, on the surface, I can kinda understand this claim, but I think it would be best to address this content firsthand. Khan doesn't specify what content is holding Mother 3 back, but from my own experience with the game and plenty of theories I've seen online, I think we can narrow it down. So I'll be going over some of the potentially problematic content that is integral to Mother 3's narrative, as I feel these examples will be most difficult to change. But are they really as impossible to alter as some may think? Well, let's find out. So, later in the game, Lucas, Kumatora, Duster, and Boney wash ashore Tain Island, and the only thing they eat are these funky looking mushrooms. They dig in, except for Boney, and they trip out. How old is Lucas? Like 12? Problem 1, depicting a very, very young child tripping out on psychedelic mushrooms. So they stumble around a bit. There's a lot of mailboxes for some reason that contain, thousands upon thousands of rat corpses and other bizarre and genuinely concerning contents. Problem 2, depicting a very, very young child having a bad mushroom trip. They also have visions of characters like Lucas's father, who explains that he is going to beat his son? Oh, and a vision of Lucas's long-lost twin brother shows up and explains that everyone Lucas loves is going to make the kid's life absolute hell. Problem 3, insinuating domestic abuse. So yeah, I think anyone familiar with Nintendo would agree the whole Tain Island segment in its current state probably won't fly. Nintendo has always been pretty cautious about direct drug representation within their games. Sure, there's been alcohol and tobacco, but I don't think Nintendo has ever gone as far as depicting their characters consuming bad mushrooms. And no, Mario does not count. The Tain drug trip is pretty intense, but it can definitely be toned down pretty easily, I'd say. First, the dialogue, mainly anything relating to abuse. Most of the dialogue in this area is absolute nonsense, but a few lines are probably a bit too heavy. Nintendo has removed references to domestic abuse in other games in their catalog, even within the Mother series, so I can see that also being a problem here. Second, the direct drug reference. I mean, I guess they could change it from mushrooms to something else. Maybe they eat some strange cake like in Earthbound. Maybe they get bit by some poisonous creature that puts them in a state of psychosis. Or maybe they could touch Fuzzy like in Yoshi's Island or something, I don't know. I think they could remove the mushrooms and that would solve some of the problem. Or if they wanted to remove the trip scene entirely, they very well could. The group could just progress through the island without needing to eat the mushrooms. The only reason they eat them in the first place is because they're hungry and need to restore HP. But then that would remove the drug trip scene entirely, and I think that's going a bit too far. The drug trip is super integral to Mother 3 in my opinion. It's really uncomforting and allows the player to see Lucas's deepest, darkest thoughts and fears. And while I do think it is somewhat problematic as it is right now, I'd hardly call it unlocalizable. And now we have the Magypsies. Now, this topic is definitely difficult to address, so please bear with me here. The Magypsies are described as beings that are neither male nor female, but they exhibit traits of both. Visually, the Magypsies resemble an exaggerated depiction of men in drag. Their dialogue can seem flirtatious, especially with the hearts after certain lines. Some of their mannerisms are a bit over the top, and they are sometimes so absurd that it's played for laughs. They're caricatures, and I can see why they may be upsetting to members of the LGBTQ community. However, I find it hard to say Mother 3 is being intentionally disrespectful here. And the Magypsies do have a lot of redeeming qualities. Actually, I'd say the Magypsies are some of the most important characters in the game. They're guardians of the Nowhere Islands, and they're even willing to sacrifice their own immortality for the good of mankind. They're kind, caring, and selfless. They raised Kumatora, they gave Lucas his psychic powers. But one instance I really love is when the Magypsy in the mountains befriends a pork trooper. The trooper gets lost, and the Magypsy cares for him, even though he's the enemy. I really like that. So I've done some browsing on different forums just to see how others view the Magypsies, specifically members of the LGBTQ community. One forum gathered comments from a post in r/asktransgender, and I feel these comments do a pretty good job summarizing the situation. I never really felt like they were being negatively portrayed as trans, but I wouldn't disagree with someone who felt they were. If I remember, it's at least pretty positive with giving a single line, neither male nor female, and then just leaving it there and treating them like normal characters afterwards. They're likable, lovable characters for the most part, and I'm not sure how to depict gender chimeras properly in visual media. Personally, I'd have been happier with a more subtly androgynous look. That's probably the main thing. The Magypsies have very little subtlety, but I don't think they were intended to be harmful or hurtful in any way. Their portrayal visually evokes a couple of problematic stereotypes, but the script treats them nicely. I think I agree. Their visual depiction may be problematic, but as characters, they're pretty great. According to an interview with series creator Shigesato Itoi stated, "If these characters really existed, I would want people who play Mother 3 not to act hostile towards them. I would want them to have fun together in a world they both share." So intentions were good, but execution may have been a bit misguided. But are these characters truly unlocalizable? Do I think they're holding Mother 3 back from releasing in the West? Well, unless Nintendo is mainly concerned about including agendered characters, then no. I find it hard to believe that the Magypsies being agendered is the sole reason for Mother 3's lack of localization. While Nintendo has censored LGBTQ characters in the past, they've been generally much more inclusive with their recent games. Although, sometimes they've taken some missteps. They could very well just tone down the Magypsies' appearance and mannerisms, and I think most players would be pretty accepting of that. The Magypsies being agendered should not be a problem, and if it is, then, Nintendo, what are you doing? I think it's easy to call Mother 3 the darkest Nintendo game, if you will. In the opening hour, Lucas and Klaus's mother is killed by a robot Drago amalgamation. Their father lashes out at his fellow townsfolk trying to comfort him, and Klaus goes missing trying to avenge his mother's death. It's pretty brutal. And then we get to the end of the game where the villainous masked man is revealed to be a brainwashed, seemingly soulless Klaus, who has a one-on-one duel with his brother. When Klaus finally comes to his senses as a result of some very comforting dialogue from his deceased mother, Klaus, well, kills himself, right in front of what remains of his family. It's one of the most emotionally and genuinely heartbreaking moments in any video game I've played. However, I don't necessarily think the inclusion of suicide is the problem here. Nintendo has shown suicide in the past, but instead, the way it's portrayed may be an issue. Samaritans, an emotional support charity aimed at preventing suicide, provides some guidelines for media portrayal of suicide and how to do it appropriately. Here are some of the points I found relatable to Mother 3. Refrain from using simplistic explanations for suicide and take care not to portray it as being triggered by a single factor such as the loss of a job or the breakdown of a relationship. I believe Klaus killed himself for two reasons. One, he felt a deep shame for the pain he caused his family. And two, he just wanted to be with his mother again. This is definitely an Eastern interpretation of suicide. In Asia, taking your life is seen as an honorable way of atoning for public disgrace and expression of one's deep sense of shame. So it's definitely more reasonable with an Eastern view in mind, but I'm not sure if this would go over well with Nintendo's localization team. Think carefully about the selection and use of music with the portrayal of a suicide. Emotive music could be interpreted as over-dramatizing or sensationalizing a death. The song that plays right before Klaus takes his life is a distorted version of the Mother 3 love theme. As it slowly swells and becomes more defined, Klaus removes his mask and aims one last bolt of lightning towards Lucas's Franklin badge, knowing that it will be reflected right back at him. Yeah, the music is definitely used to elicit an emotional response here. Take extra care when portraying suicidal behavior in young or sympathetic characters. Yeah, Klaus is a very, very sympathetic character. That whole scene right after Klaus gets struck by his own lightning bolt is just a perfect example of this. The moment of death should never be broadcasted, and if possible, entirely avoid showing the act of suicide. Allude to it only. While Mother 3 doesn't have hyper-realistic graphics or anything, Klaus's death does happen on screen. So, based on the guidelines set by Samaritans, Mother 3 doesn't really pass. I can see this being a problem, especially because there is absolutely no way Nintendo could change this ending. Yeah, Klaus's suicide is very sensationalized, but let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'm actually really curious to hear your opinions on this one. So, after analyzing all of the potentially problematic content within Mother 3, do I think the game is unlocalizable? Is the content the sole reason for it being held back? Well, I don't think the content is the sole reason for the game being held back, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a factor. I think a more likely reason for the game not being localized is because localization is just costly and difficult and risky, you know? According to Dr. Fedora, a member of the Mother 3 fan translation team, so far as I can tell, the odds are pretty good that one major reason why the game hasn't been translated is because, wow, it took a ton of hacking work to effectively rewrite the text display routines from scratch. The original Japanese release was not only not able to handle text glyphs that aren't all the same size, but in fact had a hard-coded limit to how many characters could be displayed on a single line. As a result of this, it took months of concerted effort just to get the text displaying correctly. Odds are, it's unlikely that a lack of localization has much to do with content. It's mainly just that there's a ton of low-level code rewriting required to make it even look vaguely professional in English, leaving aside entirely the translation work, which is not insubstantial. For a niche sequel to a niche game, it's an awful lot of work for something that almost certainly will not pay off for them. In addition, according to the Localization of Video Games, a study on the practical applications in their linguistic challenges, hard-coded text, for instance, are known to be a serious threat to the smooth progress of localization. A text is considered hard-coded when it does not lend itself to be linguistically manipulated at a technical level.
That makes sense to me.
Well, there you have it, I think. The amount of work compared to the return probably just isn't worth it for Nintendo. And we already have the fan translation, and Nintendo knows about it, so what's the big rush? And I know that the Mother series just keeps growing, especially with the virtual console releases of previous games and, well, Smash Bros, but it's still pretty niche. Sure, some of the content in Mother 3 is a bit iffy, and I'm curious to see how Nintendo would address some of it, especially Klaus's death, because I think that's kind of a difficult thing to have in the game, maybe. Please let me know in the comments what you guys think about that. I really want to know. So while I don't think we're going to be seeing Nintendo localize Mother 3 anytime soon, at least as a community, we have the fan translation. But most importantly, we have each other. Yeah, that was pretty sappy. Let's just end it right now. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. This is the first time I've done a video like this, and hopefully you enjoyed it and learned a thing or two. I know this is kind of a difficult topic to address just because, you know, it's a lot of speculation and rumors and stuff like that, and there's definitely a lot to take into account, but I'm generally pretty happy with how this turned out, I'd say. Again, please leave comments. I really want to know what you guys think about this topic. I really want to start a good discussion. I hope to make more content on this channel like this. So let me know what you guys want to see, and hopefully I can muster up a video or two. Once again, thank you so much. I will see you in the next video.